Welcome, everyone, on behalf of Pragmatic Marketing. I'm Stacy Weber, a Pragmatic practitioner and instructor. Today, we're very pleased to have with us Steve Rivkin. Mr. Rivkin is a recognized expert on positioning and differentiation of companies and brands. He founded a marketing and communications consultancy, Rivkin & Associates, in 1989, and is the co-author of 6 widely read books, including Idea-Wise, The Making of a Name, and Differentiate or Die. Steve has consulted for a wide range of clients, including companies such as Abbott Labs, Kraft Foods, NBC Universal, and PG&E Corporation. He's a frequent speaker on many topics that we hold near and dear here at Pragmatic Marketing. As many of you know, one of the things we do is help people like product managers and product marketing people learn how to find important problems in the market so their organization can solve real problems and increase profit. Today, Mr. Rivkin is going to take a look at some creative ways to begin finding solutions to problems, tips and techniques to spark innovation. You're going to learn some tips that you can put to work in your own life. We are very pleased to welcome Steve Rivkin.
Well, thank you, Stacy, and thanks to all of you for joining us. I'm delighted you're going to be part of this session. As Stacy just said, we are going to look at the ways to find great new ideas, find shortcuts to accelerate that process, and hopefully give you some tools to move briskly through the problem solving that I'm sure many of you have in your own businesses and your own companies. So let me get started by citing the centerpiece of all wisdom in our society, and that would be the comic strips. Here's a comic strip, BC, and the panel say, what's an idea? And the other fellow answers, an idea is an inspirational thought. And I hope you'll agree with me that that's a pretty good definition of what a new idea is. But comic strips always have 4 panels, and they pay it off in the last 2. And the last 2 here say, but where do these new ideas come from? And there the answer is, I haven't the slightest idea. We're going to try to demystify the process in this webinar and show you where they do come from, so you'll come away with a much clearer idea of where those new ideas come from. But first, I want to ask you one of 2 survey or poll questions that will help guide me, and you will find the results interesting. This should be on your screen now. Great ideas and innovations would help us, meaning you or your company, with those. Would you please click on and indicate those answers? And I'll let a couple seconds go by, and then I will show us the results, talk about that, and move on. I see you all tallying these. Thank you very much. And here's where we are, and overwhelmingly, we've got a little bit of everything. Products, marketing concepts, sales initiatives, all of the above, way, way out in front, 75% thereabouts. A few more of you are coming in, but I don't think those results are going to change. Good. I'm delighted to see those kinds of answers because what I'm going to show you are illustrations and little mini case studies drawn from all sorts of examples, marketing, new products, sales initiatives, even some in human resources. So I think we are well organized to help you respond. It looks like we just about tallied them again, 74% or so. Okay, so moving on. There are a series of fallacies in the world of creativity and innovation. Hundreds of books have been written about them. As Stacy mentioned, I'm a co-author of one of those. And one of the things that we find is that there's an assumption in the marketing and branding and communications community that only a few of us, only a precious few, are really creative, however we define that. You know what? That's wrong. That's not true. A study of rank and file mechanics found that 2/3 of them, mechanics, rated above average in creative capacity. And dozens of psychological tests reveal that creative talent is distributed normally through society, through the population, by age, by gender, by income, and so forth. It is not an exclusive trait. It is widely available and accessible. We also know how the mind originates a new idea. You prepare yourself. You collect data, information, opinion, and then while you're doing something else, this is called incubation, a part of your unconscious mind is swirling and moving around. This is the wonderful thing about the way our brains work, juxtaposing ideas, looking at possibilities and characteristics and opportunities, and then suddenly that eureka moment, sometimes it's called, out of nowhere, a new and reasonably complete idea appears to you while you're doing something else completely different. You weren't staring at a screen or looking at a blank page and saying, where is my idea? That's how we originate new ideas. Everything I'm going to show you is intended to accelerate that process. Think about these true or false questions. Think for a moment or two, and then I'll answer them for you. Highly intelligent people are the most creative. What do you think, true or false? The answer is false. It's not just highly intelligent people, it's all people. Intelligence is a factor, certainly in expressing oneself and understanding complex problems, but it is not directly germane to creativity. Next, competition tends to stimulate creativity. What do you think about that, true or false? Well, the answer there is true with limits. Killer competition. Harry, get this problem solved by tomorrow, your job is terminated. That's not good competition. But the sense of competing for ideas, working with several teams, hoping to come up with the best answer, that is a positive for stimulating creativity. And finally, people who are happy at their work tend to be more creative, true or false. I'll bet you know the answer to that one. It is true. People in a positive environment, and you can help engender that when you work together, when you brainstorm, people who are positive, upbeat, happy at what they do, indeed are more productive, are more creative. I mentioned brainstorming. The idea is something like 70 years old, the concept of brainstorming, of sharing problem solving in which members of a group, your team, your work team, or a group you pull together, spontaneously contribute ideas. That's what brainstorming is about. Now, let me stop for another poll question before I go on and talk a little bit more about brainstorming. Would you respond to this, please, too? We, your company, your business, you yourself, use brainstorming sessions to generate new ideas frequently, occasionally, or never. Would you kindly click on that so I can be guided in the remarks that I make next? And I see I have already more than 2/3 of you. Thank you for being so quick on the clicker. And I'll display those results. It looks like we have occasionally well out in the lead and frequently and never basically tie for second place. Let a couple more seconds go by and you'll see more of those numbers coming in. Okay, so what I'm taking from this is in the majority, 2/3 of the cases, occasionally you use or have used brainstorming as a tool to promote ideas. So I'll talk a little bit about that because it is so pervasive in American business, and at least for the majority of you, it's something you occasionally use. There's another fallacy about brainstorming. All we need, here's the fallacy, is a lot of brain power in the room. We get a lot of bright, good, committed, eager people in the room, and we're going to solve the problem, right? Sadly, wrong. There are a lot of different techniques, rules of the road, bylaws that you need to have effective brainstorming. And here they are, and I'm just going to talk through these quickly. First of all, invite people who want to be there, not people that are just dragged out of their office and say, we need you for 90 minutes. No, people who have some commitment to the project, to the need, to the question. Diversity helps enormously. Diversity inside the company, outside the company with consultants or vendors, certainly by gender, certainly by age, certainly by every characteristic you can come up with. A creative environment, a comfortable environment, physically comfortable, quiet, peaceful, away from other things, cell phones turned off and put away, a comfortable environment where people feel they can open up and talk and let go of ideas. It should be fun. These sessions often are best started with a little game, with a little amusement, with something lighthearted to get people relaxed. Under a dozen, if you're familiar with focus groups, most people will say 12 is the maximum you should do in a research focus group. I say the same about brainstorming sessions, having run, I've lost track, hundreds of them in my career. Under a dozen is a practical, workable group to work on a problem. Larger than that, it gets unwieldy. Daylight. Most of us, not all of us, but most of us function best during normal business hours. I would not recommend a brainstorming session at 7:30 at night after a meal and after a full business day. A time limit. These are not open-ended. They should be relatively short, 60 to 90 minutes, not all day. I was asked once to facilitate a weekend brainstorming session. I said, no, thank you. There's too much fatigue factor. Let's do 90 minutes first. If we need more, we'll go back and summon another session later on. Parameters, what are we trying to do? What are the goals here? What are the objectives? The facilitator or leader should be upbeat. If there are products, tangible things, people should be allowed to touch them and move around and get involved with them. piggybacking and ricocheting are techniques for good brainstorming. You hear an idea, someone else says, I like that, and what if we did this? And oh yeah, and that reminds me. That's the way the conversation should go. That's the way things bounce around. Everything should be recorded, either on a board, audio recording, or some other process, and usually one person designated to do that will not be able to participate in the session. It's important to get all the ideas. And lastly, I'd ask you to generate ideas first and judge later. What you don't want is on-the-fly comments about, oh, that'll never work. Oh, we tried that last year. That's too expensive. That just puts a damper on the meeting. Encourage the generation of ideas later on, second stage. You will judge them and winnow them down to a more manageable number. I sometimes distribute a list of negative things. Let me go back for a second. Of negative things that people say just to be lighthearted about it. And I mentioned a few of them. That'll never work. We tried that last year. The boss will never buy it. Our customers won't buy it. When people begin to understand that those are the typical critical comments, they'll get a little more positive about their own ideas. All right. Let's move past brainstorming into the core of what I want to tell you about, and that's why innovation is so important. Here's a study by an international consulting firm about global growth and innovation. Customers expect more from you. Prospects expect more. Shareholders, if you're publicly traded, say that innovation adds value. And innovation is proven, according to several major studies and articles in the Harvard Business Review, to capture new employees. They are drawn. Good people are drawn to what they see as innovative companies. And the all-time guru of management thinking in America, Peter Drucker, put it this way. Why innovate? Because every product, every process, every technology, every market eventually becomes old. And as the pace of change accelerates, that eventually becomes a narrower and more narrow time window. So ultimately, we're going to have to replace. We have to deal with these issues. And you know what? Business leaders agree. Here's a survey of 700 executives worldwide. 84% innovation is more critical than it was 5 years ago. But look at this. Only a quarter of them say they were pleased with their current performance in innovation. To truly innovate takes a certain amount of courage and audacity. Back to Peter Drucker, the great management guru, look what he said about this. Of course it's risky to innovate, but so is stepping into a car to drive to the supermarket. All economic activity is by definition high risk. Now here's the beautiful part of this statement. But defending yesterday that is not innovating is far more risky than making tomorrow. If somebody asks you for a definition of innovation or new ideas, there it is. We're making tomorrow. We're not defending yesterday. And the way this usually happens is a classic 6-step model of problem solving. You see the one highlighted in yellow. That's what we're about today in this webinar. But you start by defining the problem. What are we trying to do? What isn't working? What are we unsatisfied with? What are the potential causes of that? Now we're going to work on possible solutions. That's the idea generating. That's the brainstorming. Select the best from among them. Develop an action plan to implement and evaluate them. And then point number 6, back at number 1 and say, have we helped deal with the problem? That's the classic 6 steps. We're only going to focus on number 3, identifying possible solutions. And this is the book that I co-authored from which this webinar material is drawn. It's called Idea Wise. My partner and I did this some years ago, transforming ideas into tomorrow's innovations. And because we believe that so many ideas can be borrowed and adapted from other ideas, it's only fitting that we were inspired in writing this book by a book that's almost 60 years old called Applied Imagination. Unfortunately, it's out of print in most cases. In most places you look for it. Applied Imagination was written, as you can see, by an Alex Osborne, and anybody who's a fan or knowledgeable, rather, about the early days of the great American advertising agencies will know the name or the initials of the agency BBD&O, BBD&O. Osborne was the O in that ad agency BBD&O. And his advice in his book was that you should work on problem solving both individually and in group settings. One is not superior to the other, he argued, and we agree. You should assume that most solutions will come from an association of ideas, not that eureka moment, I've got it, here it is. No, maybe that idea added, tweaked, twisted, combined, worked in with another idea. And understand that existing ideas can be modified in dozens of different ways, and that's what I'm about to take you through. Whatever the idea is, wherever it came from, it can be modified in many different ways. So the essence of being idea-wise, as we call it, are the ABCs of innovation, but they're in reverse. They're CBA. Collect, borrow, and adapt. Collect ideas, borrow from the best of them, and then adapt them, and that's what I will walk you through. Collecting is seeing what's going on outside in the world, always being open to new stimulation and solutions that other people, other businesses have achieved, and thinking how can they correlate, how can they work in my field. At the very end of this webinar, you will learn that in the follow-up to that, you will receive an article from me. Actually, it's an excerpt of one of the chapters in my book, IdeaWise, that deals specifically with this topic, collecting ideas. So you'll learn about that at the end of this webinar. The B in the CBA is borrowing ideas. What do you think? Is it okay to borrow an idea, or does it have to be radically new and different? Here's another fallacy. Only somebody who's lazy and has no talent as a scoundrel would actually borrow someone else's idea. If you believe that, I hope I can disabuse you very quickly of that notion. Some of the greatest solutions and product innovations and company success stories in America have been borrowed ideas that were adapted to a different purpose. Is it okay for hospitals to borrow from the Disney organization to learn customer service? Why would that be a negative idea? In fact, it's quite positive, quite successful, and Disney has built a separate business around doing exactly that, training other service industries what works so well for them. And Thomas Edison, the famous inventor, said it this way: make it a habit to be on the lookout for novel and interesting ideas that others have used successfully. Your idea needs to be original only in its adaptation to the problem you are currently working on. So, you tell me, what is Edison saying that it's okay to do? I think he's saying it's okay to borrow, to steal somebody else's idea, but then to adapt it to what you're working on. Keep your eyes open to what's working somewhere else. I'll show you some examples coming up in just a moment, and use them on your own behalf. So let's get to some examples. You're the Haagen Dazs company. You make premium ice cream. And one of your challenges is to keep people interested in ice cream by coming up with a new breakthrough flavor. Flavors drive sales and sampling. All right, how might you do that? Well, some of the answers in the session being run at Haagen Dazs were, we'll get a bunch of chefs together and have them cook up some exotic new flavors. Okay, fairly expensive and maybe a little exotic, but we could do that. Some other bright soul said, let's take the whole marketing and sales group down to a really warm place, maybe the Florida Keys, and think about ice cream in that kind of environment. That was roundly applauded as a tactic, but then shot down by management. What Haagen Dazs actually did was look within their organization, they're a global company, and see if they could borrow an idea from somewhere else. And from Argentina, Haagen Dazs borrowed the flavor Dulce de Leche. If you've ever had it, and if you love sweets, you'll crave it once you've tasted it once. Caramel and vanilla-based product. But it was only available in Argentina. So their thought was, what if we borrowed it and brought it to North America, where it is now one of their top sellers, both in supermarkets and also in their retail shops. What did they do? They borrowed from within. If you're part of a large organization, a large company, look across channels and look across business units to see what someone else is doing. It might bear fruit on your problem. Don't assume that the answer is going to be unique to your need, your business, your problem. Look within the company and look for some pooling of common knowledge and intelligence, which many companies are increasingly doing them on the intranet, in access granted chat rooms and so forth. Who else out there among the 40,000 people in this worldwide company you might post is working on something related to this problem? Another example. Telepizza, which is a highly successful company in Spain, was borrowed from Domino's. Every part of it was borrowed from Domino's when it started in 1987 with a modest investment. The whole aspect of takeout or delivery pizza for increasingly busy consumers, and often both members, husband and wife, if it's that kind of family unit, who are working increasingly using takeout food or delivery food. They borrowed it. And the results have been enormously successful. 600 stores in Spain, 400 plus in other countries. That's what they look like. That's what their little delivery vehicles look like? Is this a breakthrough idea of staggering creativity? Well, it depends on how you look at things. But if you're inclined to say no because it's derived from somebody else's success, then I think you're missing my point about borrowing and adapting a product or a solution or a concept for your needs. Yes, it was adapted, flavors, delivery speeds, pricing, and all that for the Spanish market, absolutely. But the core idea came from an existing and quite large success. Similarly, if you have ever flown in Europe and you're trying to save money, you will likely come across the name Ryanair. What is Ryanair modeled on? Because they are modeled on it, as the expression goes, lock, stock, and barrel. They're modeled on Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines created the mold. One kind of aircraft, one kind of training, hub cities, low pricing, no assigned seating, on and on. And that's what Ryanair did, highly successfully. So, the man who wrote the book, Dale Carnegie, about how to win friends and influence people, said the ideas I stand for in his book are not mine. I borrowed them from Socrates, I swiped them from Chesterfield, I stole them from Jesus, and I put them in a book. If you don't like their rules, whose would you use? So I give you that thought to wrap up this section on borrowing ideas. There's an elegance and a beauty and a simplicity to borrowing ideas and then making them work for you. But it takes a mindset that's open to that process and willing to fight the battles internally, saying, look at this best practice. Look how somebody has so mastered this field. We can work with this. We can make this work for us. When you're ready to go the next step and adapt ideas, you will quickly see that there are a number of ways to adapt an idea. What do I mean by adapt? Twist it, tweak it, do something to it. Very few ideas just come, you just don't bolt them on to your company and say, oh, that's going to work fine. No, you're going to have to do all sorts of things. And I'm going to talk, as far as time permits us, in this webinar, about a series of these, about substituting, combining, magnifying, minimizing, bringing something back, asking what else could it be, and show you examples. I hope this will inspire you to look at ideas you already have or come across, or someone says, gee, do you think we could do this? Say, well, what could we do with it? So let's jump into those. What could you substitute? What do I mean by substitute? Well, let's look at the creative process itself. West Side Story, first a Broadway musical, then later a hit movie, and just in the recent years the musical has been revived with great success on Broadway. For all its enormous creative clout and the people behind it, including Stephen Sondheim and the great Leonard Bernstein. What was West Side Story? The book was Romeo and Juliet. Literally, Romeo and Juliet transferred to the rough streets of the West Side of Manhattan. Now, does that make it less of a creative product? I can't imagine anybody would argue that. It's a brilliant piece of award-winning music and stagecraft, but it's derived from the story that Shakespeare wrote of Romeo and Juliet. And that's true of substituting so many things, modernizing, updating, but substituting. What could you substitute? Well, how about you substitute a brand name? We are looking at a quick food outlet inside a large hospital on the East Coast of the United States, a hospital. It's not their food, it's not their cafeteria food, it's a brand name that many people will recognize from airports and elsewhere on the grounds of the hospital. What did they do? They substituted a brand name for a no name or a questionable perceived quality name of their own cafeteria. What could you substitute? Hotels are doing the same thing. If you've been in hotels recently, particularly sizable ones, you know that most of them have business centers. It's a profit center for them, and all of us traveling want to be able to work online and get access to printing things and faxing things, no matter how much equipment we're carrying ourselves. So increasingly, hotels are replacing a generic business center, who runs it, how good are the people, what do they have, with a mini store from UPS or FedEx, branded as such, and you're looking at one. This is in the large Hilton hotel property in Chicago. What is this? It's a substitution. Instead of our own brand or our non-brand, we're bringing in something that has existing equity. And that might work in your business or your situation. Question to ask yourself is, what could we substitute? Next, what could we combine? A plus B. What could we bring together? What could we bring together that might make a difference in our innovation? And by the way, we encourage your questions during this process, and there's a mechanism for you to enter them, and we will respond as time permits and as they pop up. So please don't hesitate, if I've stimulated a thought, to pose a question to us. Our terrific meeting organizers will get them in front of me. Combining. Let's look at another true creative individual, Paul Simon, the singer and composer. He was asked once on a TV show about his inspiration for Bridge Over Troubled Waters, the wonderful song that he did with Art Garfunkel. And he very simply said, well, I combined two melodies in order to do that. He said he was carrying around two melodies in his head. I mean, composers do this thing. One was a Bach chorale, and the other was a gospel tune from the Swan Silvertones. Hard to imagine two different kinds of music. And he said, I was just playing around with those melodies in my head, and I just pieced them together. And the interviewer said something like, really? That's where this wonderful song came from? And Paul Simon, who's very self-effacing about his creative abilities, if you've ever seen him, listened to him talk about it, said, yeah, let me demonstrate. He reached behind him for the interview chair, picked up his guitar, and said, here's what the Bach chorale sounds like. You've never lived until you've heard Paul Simon play a Bach chorale on his guitar. And then he switched over. He said, here's the gospel tune. They played that separately. And he said, and then I just started piecing them together, and you began to hear Bridge Over Troubled Waters. If a terrific contemporary pop composer can combine things, why can't we combine them to make better solutions, better products, better answers? Sometimes it's not just we'll do this, we'll do A, we'll do B. What if we do A plus B? So let me give you a few simple examples. The Band-Aid folks from Johnson & Johnson, who certainly know something about marketing, have produced a healthy combination, I would call it, of a Band-Aid that has antibiotic right on the pad. Now, particularly for mothers who will appreciate this, if you have a kid that's got a scrape or a bruise and is in need of some medical attention at home, the first thing you think about is cleaning out the wound, or it should be. Clean it out with soap and water, maybe hydrogen peroxide, maybe some antibiotic cream or lotion that you have, and then you do what? Then you want to seal it off, you put the Band-Aid on it. Well, for the sake of convenience, which is a terrific driver for new products and marketing successes, you'll see convenience come back in another example later on. For the sake of convenience, J&J said, why don't we combine the two and put the antibiotic right on the pad? So you don't have to hunt around for, where is that Neosporin? Do we still have a tube of, where's the whatever we're going to use for cleaning the wound? Do you pay a premium for this? You bet you do. Absolutely. We always pay for convenience. But Americans typically are very happy to pay for convenience. This is a combination of two things that is derived from the phenomenon of watching how your customers use your product. Remember, it's a Band-Aid. It covers a wound or a scrape or a scratch or something else. But it's not used in isolation, and that was the simple finding of the pattern of watching usage. It's used in a sequence of events in which the wound is identified. That's a fancy way of saying your kid is screaming because he fell down and blood coming from his knee. The need is identified, but then the wound is cleaned or treated in some way, and then the Band-Aid is applied. What if we could combine that process and take over several parts of it? Look at your own flow, whatever goods or services you're involved in. Look at how your user, the end user, your consumer, your customer, deals with what you provide. Is there some way you could combine and make easier for that individual steps in the process? That could be a healthy combination for you. Here's one from the traveling field. If you're above the age of, I would say, 45, you will remember a time when there were no such things as the rollerboard bags that you see here. There was instead something called wheelies. Wheelies were a set of rollers, a set of wheels that were strapped on to an existing small piece of baggage with bungee cords. And that's how you transported your bag through the airport, onto the airplane, then you unstrapped the bungee cord, trying not to poke out your eye or snag something with it when the bungee cord came out lost its tension around the bag, and stored both of those in the overhead bin, and then had to remember to reattach them and remember the attached wheelies, as they were called. Until one day somebody got the bright idea of, what if we started making luggage with the wheels attached? Now, if you've never seen the predecessor of this, that's going to sound silly to you, because there's always been this sort of bag in your life. But I want to tell you, they were a huge innovation. They revolutionized airplane luggage in particular, and luggage in general. Wheeled luggage became a billion-dollar product line, or business line, practically overnight, and absolutely wiped out those separate wheels that were attached with various devices to luggage. Now it's just considered that's the way most luggage is available, up to larger and larger sizes, not just carry-on or rollerboard, but even the ones you transport yourself. But what was it? Somebody observing that a solution for a problem, I don't want to drag this heavy piece of luggage around, let's put wheels on it, let me strap wheels on it, wasn't the most effective way to do it. It was cumbersome, it was awkward, it was time-consuming. Can't we do it better? And thus were born the rollerboard bag. Look at the way your product is being used, or your service is being, or your application is being brought to life. Can you improve it by looking at the whole process that's involved? The same idea of combinations works for slogans or taglines or theme lines. This is Target. You probably recognize the big red circle. And their well-known slogan, which is a registered service mark, in case you didn't know, slogans and taglines can indeed be protected, should be. Expect more, pay less. Now, why do I call that a combination? Well, it's obviously a combination of two thoughts, but more interestingly to me, it's a combination of two very different ways of attacking the brain. Because one of these is a right brain, one of these is a left brain idea. Expecting more is an emotional, playful, subjective idea. Yeah, I want more in my life. I want more in my shopping experience. Paying less is pretty rational and logical and analytical. That's a left brain aspect. And when you look at the way most of us process information and think about things, you begin to realize that some of the most effective slogans, taglines, and even brand names have elements of both left brain and right brain. They combine both. When the movie studio DreamWorks names themselves as DreamWorks, dream being a right brain concept, works, an old industrial term, being a left brain idea. Or George Lucas created a company, he of Star Wars fame. George Lucas created a company called Industrial Light and Magic. Now think about that. Industrial Light, the first two words of his production company, are classic left brain ideas. Industrial and light. We work with images of light. But what's the rest of his name? Industrial Light and Magic. Hollywood, that's where the magic happens. That's the emotional, playful, creative, subjective, intuitive right brain side. Think about how you might combine elements in a slogan, tagline, or theme line. And since I mentioned names, let me talk about one of the most common and practical, and this may be a good technique for you to have, to know about, and that's combining elements in a name to create a new name, which is no easy task these days. Here's my example. This was a new phone service, and it had among its attributes these 12 words. In other words, it was meant to help access, bridge things, have a clear connection, be direct and easy. You can read these faster than I can say them. How do we name this new phone service? Well, if you use a simple A plus B software, which probably any 12-year-old you know could do for you if you didn't find it online, you begin to realize that these 12 terms, these 12 attributes, all brought together create 144, give or take, possible names. And sure, some of them are silly and don't make sense, but some of them, this is just the start of the alphabetical list, make a great deal of sense. How about ClearLink? Okay? ClearLink. Or Connect Direct. Not only does it have meaning, but it rhymes. This is a simple way to work with building block terms and words about your product, your company, your brand, your division, and create new names. What is it? It's a combination, just as I've been talking about, combining ideas, combining thoughts. If you'd like more tips on naming, many of them derive from the same practices that I'm showing you in this webinar, go to namingnewsletter.com. This is a monthly blog that I produce, that my company produces. It's all free. It's all access. You can download more than 90 articles that we have published about tips and tactics for how to name products, brands, services, and companies. And the combining idea is absolutely one of them. So let's move on. Stacy, if you're listening in, I'm sure you are, do we have any questions yet from the audience?
Thanks for asking, Steve. We actually don't have very many questions coming in, and honestly, I'm completely engrossed in your talk, so I can understand that other people are too.
Stacy, thank you, but you're paid to be engrossed. Come on, be fair about this.
Oh, no, actually, I wouldn't. I wasn't serious. But anyone, if any of you have any questions or something that you would like us to really dive into, just let us know. Well, actually, Steve, I just had one come in here.
Okay, fire away.
Here. It says, hello, Steve. Assuming you have a good idea and are first in a market, what is the key to being sure you actually capitalize on it and are not usurped by a competitor who capitalizes on the idea? 2 recent examples. MySpace was first, but Facebook's number 1, of course. Yahoo was the first search engine, but Google is now the generic name for the idea of search engine.
Yes. Perfect examples. MySpace didn't win the day. Facebook did. And what was the other example? Yahoo, but Google is the default, almost lowercase. Google that, the way people used to say Xerox that when they meant photocopy something. Very interesting and very tricky question. Being first is a huge advantage. We pride ourselves on as consumers on recognizing something new, and we're drawn to it. But to be successful, you also have to mate the being first with enough clout, with enough mass, with enough dollars in many cases to own that part of own mind share and thus market share. Just because you're first with an idea, as those 2 examples prove out perfectly, doesn't mean you're going to be ultimately the market leader. If I asked the group, and I know we can't instantly do a poll, but I think I know what the answer would be. If I asked the group, who was the first to say that they were the un-cola in the soft drink field, a lot of people would remember that was 7-Up. 7-Up was the un-cola. It was a lemon-lime beverage. It was clear-colored. Colas were dark. It tasted of lemon-lime. The colas, Pepsi and Coke primarily tasted of caramel and other flavorings. But the question, so they were the first to be the un-cola, and they positioned themselves as the alternative. Now, could somebody else have been the un-cola? That's the question I'm asking. Somebody else who was already out in the marketplace but just didn't claim that turf. And the answer is absolutely. Ginger ale, which existed for a long time before 7-Up, could have been the un-cola had they chosen to promote themselves that way, or position themselves that way. But they did not. So sometimes it's just getting there with the idea first, and then you've got to struggle for mass and clout and size and scope of dominance in order to hold on to it. I wish I could say that being first with a good idea is the answer, but is the road to success, but it isn't always. Often it's the reason that you see good ideas being acquired by other entities or franchised by others because it needs that clout, it needs that mass of marketing, of advertising, of infrastructure, of research and development to bring something to life. So that's a long answer to a very excellent question. Just being first isn't enough, but I don't want you to stop trying to be first with a new idea because new ideas are what drive business and success. Mm-hmm. Okay? And I see a question that's popped up on my screen. I'm referencing mostly tangible products. Kristen asked, do I have any examples for innovation in the service sector? I do coming up. Bear with me. And the reason, if you're curious why I've used so many tangible products, is they tend to be the most universal. Most everybody knows about food or ice cream or mouthwash or deodorant, and that's why I've used so many of those. But yes, indeed, I have some coming up promptly coming up in the service sector. Let me go back to this flow of what you can do to an existing idea. Just recapping. Collecting ideas, borrowing ideas, adapting ideas. What could you magnify or minimize? This is one of the most provocative areas that's going on, I see, in business today. Things keep getting larger. Think SUVs, giant SUVs blocking out the sun when they pass you on the road. But think about the Cooper Mini, also a huge success at the other end, smaller. Simultaneously, so many industries and sectors are getting both big and small, magnify or minimize. Look at this product. It's the Hungry Man Double XL food, 1.5 pounds of food in this package, and look at this lovable guy. They say, I'm even more lovable when I'm full. Yeah, you're full and you're on your way to obesity if you're consuming that much in a single meal. We're not going to talk about America's problem with overconsumption. The point is, if you want a lot of food in a serving, and you see this at Taco Bell with the giant loaded burritos and so forth, add more to it. Go bigger than before. Bigger sells. But so does smaller. I've kept this photo in, even though it's dated, because it shows the progression in the early decades of what we now call cell phones or mobile devices. Yes, they were once that large on the left. That's a military version of a field phone, and that's what the progression was through the flip phones, and now, of course, the ever-increasing miniature ones, and now they're growing larger with iPhones and others. Sometimes smaller is better in a field. In the restaurant service sector, we're finding in high-traffic areas, this is an airport, but it could be a school, a military installation, an access corridor underground in airports. We're having Taco Bells that are quite small, muy pequeño. A Taco Bell Express, which is all about that width. I'm guessing that's about 8 to 10 feet wide. That's all it is. Order it one side, pick it up on the other. What about smaller? And in many sectors, that is indeed what's happening. Newsweek, well, it's still its online presence, did an article about Honey, I Shrunk the Store, said that sensing some of their customers are tired of trudging through stores the size of airplane hangars, big retailers like Walmart and Home Depot are starting to think small. Have you been in a Home Depot recently and asked somebody where you find the new kind of light bulbs replacing the old incandescent light bulbs? And they say, yeah, go down that corridor to aisle double J and turn left, and you realize you are in this thing is the size of an airplane hangar. So, what's to be done? Walmart, brilliant company, always on the leading edge of trying things, now has several hundred of these neighborhood markets. That's the name. That's what it looks like. It's 1/4 as big as the superstore. Depending on where you live in the U.S., you may have come across one of these. 1/4 as big, 1/4 the number of SKUs, of stocking units, but more accessible, more friendly, more convenient. Larger, smaller. Look at your own product makeup. Have you bundled all your products together into one big sales armada? Good for you. But what about making them available individually as well? Could there be a larger size or a smaller size? And by the way, I'm using size that could also be more taste, the bolder taste in products, more kick in the spicy food, more kick in the Altoids mints, more mint, more powerful mint. Anything that goes larger or smaller, bigger, more assertive, less assertive, meets this criteria of magnifying or minimizing. It can be the expression, the sensitivity, as well as the product itself. Here is another fascinating area of what you could do to something, how you could adapt it. What else could it be? What else could this thing that you're working with be? Let me go back to the creative field and acknowledge one of the great templates of creative ideas. If you're not a reader of Harry Potter just for fun or enjoyment, you really should be a reader of Harry Potter for the creative ideas that it relates to the world of marketing and branding and products and services. J.K. Rowling is brilliant. Her mind works in strange and mysterious ways in coming up with new ideas. Here's just one example from her books from the Chamber of Secrets. If you're a fan, you'll recognize the scenario. It was also featured in the movie. When Mrs. Weasley is angry at her son Ron, she sends him not a letter, but what the author called a howler. And this is a letter that floats in, lands in front of Ron, opens itself up, and screams at the top volume in front of the whole school what Mrs. Weasley is angry about. Ron, I told you you should be doing this. Why? Her voice, you can almost imagine the accusatory finger pointing out of the letter. It's brilliant. What else could it be? Why does a letter have to be flat and two-dimensional or appear as an email or a PDF attachment? Why can't it talk to you? Why can't a greeting card open up, when you open it up rather, why can't it sing and talk to you? Oh, you know that they already do, with little super inexpensive pennies, microchips that are activated when you unfold the greeting card, making it much less old-fashioned. Now it sings, it talks. You can even embed your own voice in some of these microchips. That's the illustration of what else could it be. Back to convenience. Tuna, for most of us, comes in a can and has to be opened. But Starkist is also doing a brisk business, selling at a premium tuna in a sealed foil pouch. Note the upper right, the slight indentation. That's where you rip it across to empty out the tuna. No tools needed. You can take it to work. You can eat it at your desk. You can take it on a picnic. You don't need that can opener to get into it. What else could it be? In what other form could we deliver our product, our app, our service, what it is we're making available? Does it only have to be in the traditional way that we've delivered? I know this, that we've offered it. I know this is a tangible product, but by extension, I hope you're thinking, well, that's right, we've always sold through a distribution network. What about direct sales of a limited number of our products online, or with a coach or an ambassador to go online and help talk people through and answer the technical questions? What else could it be? Another part of what else could it be is a standalone business. Some of you may know that Toys R Us, the widely successful toy chain, came out of a failed department store. It literally was taken out of a failing interstate department store chain and set up on its own as just toys, or quite literally, Toys R Us. Well, maybe a part of your business, as the example you're looking at here, could be removed from its traditional home and set up as a freestanding business. For decades, the oil and lube business for automobiles took place at only one of two places: the car dealer, where you bought it or leased your car. That meant getting an appointment, bringing it in, maybe waiting for it, maybe coming back, maybe getting a loaner car, complicated, time-consuming, or taking it to a corner gas station. How good's the quality? When are they going to get to it? I have to drop it off in the morning, pick it up later. What happened? These 10 and 15-minute Jiffy Lube and all their competitors set up, bring it in, it drives through, you watch it, you see it happen, you're out on your way in 15 minutes, $24.99. A standalone business. That's what else could it be? What could you take out of an existing lineup of products or services? Look at what you offer. Look at all the parts of it. Look at maybe some of the underperforming or the highly profitable parts of a product line and say, does this deserve to stand on its own? One more category. What could you bring back? What has been there and maybe you've, I don't want to say ignored, but not paid that much attention to? What might you bring back? Here's an example from a more technical area and technology-driven area. Intel has brought back numerical branding and really opened up many people's ideas long before there was the iPhone 4 and the 4S and the iPhone 5 and so forth. Intel did this with their Pentium line. The Pentium is derived, by the way, from the Greek word for 5, pente. It was the 5th generation of chips. But as they refined them, made them better, improved them, they did not rename it. They didn't go from Pentium to whatever would be 6 in the Greek language. I don't know what the word is. No, there was Pentium 2, you see in the upper right, then Pentium 3, and then Pentium 4. They brought back this concept of sequential or numerical branding as a way of indicating this version is superior than the last. It's still Pentium, which you know, at least at the time this was being done, was the benchmark, was the state of the art in chips, but it's the next generation of it, 2, 3, 4. And then when Pentium, when Pentium and when Intel, but when Pentium did really have something that went beyond the next generation status, they added a different word to Pentium, not just a number. They interrupted the numerical sequence when they had the Pentium Pro. This was more than just Pentium 4. This was a quantum leap forward. This was something even further. So, what could you bring back? What about this tried and true sequence of identifying brands in terms of their numerical sequence, implying one is superior to the other? And there are old-fashioned ideas. I should have put that in quotes because I mean it ironically. There are old-fashioned virtues in most every field that as we race toward technology and instant access and online everything, sometimes are forgotten. And here's a story about banking. The Wall Street Journal said the nation's banks are trying something desperate to lure new customers. And what is it? It's called customer service. What a shocking idea. After years of closing branches, laying off tellers while they pursue more glamorous clients, many banks are lowering fees, extending hours, and adding other user-friendly touches, bringing back the notion of what banking once was. My dad was a pharmacist. He owned a retail pharmacy. He had a relationship with his local banker. He could stop at that bank branch 5 or 10 minutes before it officially opened at 9 o'clock, and there'd be somebody to take his deposits from the night before and give him a receipt for it. That was customer service. And there's a bank in the East Coast, recently acquired. It was called Commerce Bank, that was one of the best at bringing back these ideas. So I think you know what I'm going to invite you to do, and that is think about what could you bring back in the history, the heritage, the lineage of your company or your industry that's lacking today, that's been cast aside. Commerce Bank, billing themselves as America's most convenient banks, had all kinds of great assets in addition to their monetary assets. Hours, longer hours, evening and Saturdays, multiple drive-thrus, not just one, but 2, 3, 4, free checking, ATM fees, quick loan approvals, free coin sorting in the lobbies. How could they do this, you're wondering, without losing money? The answer is they shaved a certain percentage or added a certain percentage to their fee-generating business to fund these, and customers did not mind. They became, over the last decade, the fastest-growing mid-sized bank in America. You can see how rapidly they grew with a terrific profit range and a huge stock multiple, to the extent that they were acquired within recent years by TD North Bank, an even larger bank, and folded into their operations. That's the ultimate payoff for bringing back a successful idea, catching the attention of somebody else who says, wow, this could transform our business. And indeed, TD North has now been transformed into America's most convenient bank. They adopted and adapted the concept of an acquired a subsidiary or an acquired entity because they saw such promise in it. Back to the running order of my questions. What could you bring back? Question from William just popped up on my screen. It said, doctors are making house calls again. Thank you. Bravo. That is an illustration. If you're a young physician, a general practitioner in family medicine, starting out today, how are you going to differentiate yourself? By having a nifty office and colorful stuff on the walls for kids? Sure, but others are doing that. What about the ancient notion, the old and outdated notion, but still desired, of making house calls? You go to see people in their homes. Thank you for that. It's a perfect example of what you could bring back. So, time for me to wrap up and see what other questions some of you might have. What I've talked you through are some basic precepts about the creative process. I want you to feel good about being creative individually, working on your own or in a company. The notion of brainstorming and some tips and tactics to make it work better for you and your organization as a tool, since the majority, you said you use it occasionally. And then this series of concepts of what you do after you've collected and borrowed an idea to make it uniquely your own. What could you do to it? Tweak it, twist it, substitute for it, combine it, make it larger, make it smaller, bring it back in a new fashion. Collect, borrow, and adapt. Closing thought for you. One of my favorite quotes from George Bernard Shaw. Few people think more than 2 or 3 times a year. I have made an international reputation for myself by thinking once or twice a week. What I hope these ideas have done have given you the thought process to say, I can go back and do wonderful things, think once or twice a week, build a reputation for myself and my company by using some of these tools. We have time for more questions, and as we wait to see if those come up, I'm going to turn this back over to Stacy, because I know she has some closing remarks and wants to tell you about what follows, what comes next. Stacy, back to you.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you. So very interesting, and there's just a lot of ideas there that we can use in our business, yes, but in solving problems in our lives as well. So lots of great stuff there. For those of you who have attended, we will be sending a follow-up, and in part of that email will be the excerpt that Steve mentioned earlier. It's an excerpt from the IdeaWise book, a good chapter of reading for you, so you'll receive that. Pragmatic Marketing is going to take a bit of a summer vacation here. We'll be back with our Pragmatic Live webinar series in September. So in September, we're going to be doing a session from Tim Rhodes of Oracle. That'll be focused on competitive intelligence. So make sure to come back and register for that one as well. Steve, I don't see any additional questions coming in. I think we can just go ahead and wrap this up. And
okay.
I just really want to thank you for being with us. It's been a very good session.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.